important gold update. Look, we've just passed the 200-day moving average. Before this call, I was looking at several tweets from different people showing these charts where you've got this big line from like 2011, 2012 down to today for gold. And I wanted to get Andy Hoffman on the line. He is our go-to guy for the daily moves in gold and gold manipulation and the macroeconomic scenario that we're facing, really. The realistic news, the real news. Andy is the marketing director at milesfranklin.com. It's ran by Andy Scheckman. You guys have seen my interviews with him. But I buy all my metal from Miles Franklin. I store my metal with Miles Franklin. So look, certainly they didn't pay me to say this, but if you're looking to buy some physical precious metals, please go to Miles Franklin. Good, honest people, and certainly supporters of the show here at Future Money Trends. Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure as always. And I'm not the expert of daily. It's daily, weekly, monthly, and now annual based on what you're talking about right here. And look, people, here's exactly what's going on. As I just watched minutes before this podcast, silver again taken down like 25 cents in 2 minutes, which is exactly what they did last week, right on the day after the Syrian attack and the horrible NFP jobs report. Then you had yesterday afternoon, just as the dollar index is getting to exactly 100, they have Steve Mnuchin come out and say absolutely nothing, but they try to pretend that he's refuting Trump's constant comments about wanting a weak dollar, which of course he does. And they attacked again. And then this morning, I mean, what more news can you possibly want between the horrible economic data, the plunging interest rates, which are still at look, I said back in January, I said 2.5 would be the high in the 10-year rate when the traders had all-time high record short positions in bonds. And here we are at 2.2 this morning, which is the lowest since the election. The dollar is pretty much near the lowest since the election. The whole Trumpflation meme is dead, as I said it would be in my Turning on Trump audio blog from 2 days after the election. The economic data is horrible across the board today. We have the French election coming up this weekend with European bond spreads blowing out. We have, North Korea, Syria, and of course Trump, turning out to be an abysmal, soon-to-be one-term failure. So all this is going on at once. But the reason you're seeing such dramatic moves in precious metals, which, by the way, in dollar terms, gold's up $130 this year and silver's up, $2, more than $2 or so, even with all this smashing going on. The reason that's occurring is we're starting to see the shortages in the global physical market as this perfect storm of production plunging, because we're now in a long-term decline of production in both gold and silver that could take them down 20 or 25% in the next 5 or 10 years. We have almost no above ground available for sale inventories. Demand has been soaring because the price of gold in pretty much every currency, aside from the manipulated dollar gold price, are at or near all-time highs. So what you have now is some major resistance levels that the cartel is fighting to the death. As I wrote in an article a few weeks ago, their own death at right now. The first being the 200-week moving averages. And let me explain to people. I'm not talking about the 200-day moving average. That's immaterial. Anything that's short-term in the precious metal market, or frankly any financial market these days, because they're so rigged, is immaterial. They can paint the 200-day moving average, a 50-day moving average, do whatever they want. That's what they do in the paper markets. But when you're talking about longer-term averages, 200 weeks is 4 years, and it's very, very hard to create a crossover in those markets. And the more that you manipulate markets as they have for so many years, the stronger those levels become as support and resistance levels. And when you're talking about the 200-week moving average in gold, we're talking about gold and silver crossed above that average in the year 2003 and stayed above it for 10 years as prices soared for both gold and silver for 10 years. And of course, the process of capping that started in 2011 with first the Sunday Night Silver Massacre in May 1st of 2011. Then, of course, gold on Labor Day Eve of 2011 when they smashed gold at its all-time high, just as the Swiss National Bank was pegging the franc to the euro and thus killing off the last remaining actual currency that had any kind of value. So anyway, starting in 2011, those averages started to move toward each other, and it wasn't until April of 2013 when gold and silver finally fell below their 200-week moving averages for the first time in 10 years. And the reason they did was not because of market forces. It was because on April 11, 2013, Barack Obama had his unprecedented, never repeated, closed-door meeting with the top 15 bank, too big to fail bank CEOs that day, including Lloyd Blankfein, Goldman Sachs, and Jamie Dimon. That was April 11, 2015. On April 12, 2015, Goldman Sachs comes out with an aggressive short sell recommendation on gold. And that day, which was a Friday, and Monday the 15th, those 2 days, gold and silver were inexplicably smashed by 10% for absolutely no reason. And the reason, of course, was that they were discussing behind closed doors how they needed to get the price down because of all the money printing they were doing and all the demand that was going into the sector. So we spent 4 years below those lines. And actually, in most other currencies, the prices bottomed and soared higher, within 2 years. In fact, as we speak, gold in most currencies is either at, near, or sometimes well above previous all-time highs. Gold didn't and silver didn't bottom until December 2015 in dollar terms, ironically on the very day that the Fed raised interest rates, for anyone that believes rising rates is bad for gold. And we've crept up toward that line ever since. And here we are. We finally crossed above the 200-week moving average lines about 2 weeks ago. Gold is 1246, so we're well above it. And silver, if you could believe, is 1814, which is exactly where we are this morning after today's and yesterday's, big smashes. So we're still fighting that battle for silver, while in gold it's been pretty much won. Now, the bigger picture, even bigger than the 200-week moving average, though, is exactly what you alluded to in the beginning of this. Now, I've been talking about the 200-week moving average forever, for like 2 months now. But what I talked about in my special audio blog that I taped this morning is, as you call it, well, as I call it, the downtrend line war. Because what you're talking about is starting in September 2011, when gold and silver were unceremoniously smashed down when they should have been soaring because of the Swiss news. Mm-hmm. You've had a downtrend line in both metals that has been inexorably held down for all these years, even as gold and silver are bottom. Now, the four events that define gold trying to get out of that channel was one, of course, in September 2011. The second was a year later in the summer of 2012 when you had that historic European banking crisis, when Mario Draghi came out and was forced to say, I'll do whatever it takes to save the euro because Europe was collapsing and people were buying gold. That was gold trying to get above that line. But of course, they spent the whole summer, the cartel, not letting that happen. And then it kept falling again. And then it took 4 more years for it to get back up to that downtrend line. And twice in the past year, it got right up to that line. The first was after the Brexit. It literally got right up to that line, which at the time was, in the 1350s or so. And then they smashed it back down. And then the second time was, yep, you guessed it, election night, when gold went up into the above 1,300 briefly. It was right at that line again. And that's when the surprise powers that be created the Trumpflation meme. So, because remember, we spent the entire summer, any hint that Trump was going to win, and gold prices would go up and stocks would fall. And remember, just 2 days before the election, James Comey comes out and says, I exonerate Hillary. She's great. Nothing's wrong. So what happened? That gold was smashed right before the election, and of course the stock market went up. But of course, when Trump won, as I predicted he was, and the initial reaction was what it should have been, with stocks falling and gold rising, they came in and said, we can't let this happen. We are going to create a whole new propaganda meme overnight. We're going to smash gold into oblivion. We're going to take the stock market up and say there's Trumpflation and that he's going to cut taxes and everything's going to be great, and we're going to have big fiscal stimulus and repeal Obamacare. And of course, I said none of that would happen from day one. And they pushed gold and silver down again. And here we are 5 months later, the Trumpflation meme is dead. Interest rates are plunging. All of Trump's plans are dead. Trump has become a pariah. Frankly, I don't see the difference anymore between him and Hillary Clinton. And as we are on the verge of war with Syria and North Korea and on the verge of going into recession officially, gold and silver get right up to those lines again. And what happens in the last few days? They are attacking viciously. And the reason I wrote my article this weekend called The Last Days of the Cartel was because in silver in particular, now the highest ever short position in silver was right after the Brexit, as they came out and desperately tried to prevent precious metals from soaring as they should have after the Brexit. But that was during a visible crisis. Right now, as of last Tuesday, the cartel had their largest ever short position in the history of the COMEX, except no crisis. I mean, there's bad things going on, but we still got the bubblicious valuations of the stock market. So again, this is why they came out with Steve Mnuchin yesterday, who again said, listen to my audio blog, he said absolutely nothing, but just simply coming out and talking, they attack gold and silver to keep them from breaking out above this downtrend line. And then when they again came back up this morning, you have this. I mean, this morning, as I'm looking at my screen, the interest rates are at their lowest level since the election. They are getting crushed. Oil's getting crushed. Stocks are getting crushed. The economic data was horrible. The dollar is 99.8. It's much lower than when Steve Mnuchin came on and started talking yesterday. And yet they just took silver down from 1835 to 1812 like in 2 minutes. Because again, look what time it is. It's 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, i.e. the London fix, i.e. key attack time number one for the last 15 years. So again, we're talking about wars right here going on. Wars in the financial market. Look at Bitcoin basically hitting an all-time high this morning. We're talking about military wars potentially, economic wars, political wars, the French election, as I said in my article last week, a Brexit times 100 if Marine Le Pen wins. Heck, this weekend we learned that they sent double ballots out to all the French expatriates overseas who don't want her to win because they're that desperate. And you know what? They're going to lose because the people are going to come out in droves like they did in the French Revolution to make sure that she wins that first round. I mean, I put today in my audio blog, I was listing all the stuff that's wrong with this monster, Emmanuel Macron, this 39-year-old snot-nosed silver spoon banker from Rothschilds who's running against her. He's going to lose too. And it's going to be a Brexit times 100 when she wins. The first round is going to be this weekend. And when she gets through that and therefore beats all the rigging that they attempted this weekend, it's only going to embolden people to come out in the second round and help her to win. So again, all this stuff is going on, and we may be bombing North Korea at any moment, and we may be bombing Syria at any moment. All this stuff is going on. This is why you're seeing such desperate attempts to hold the prices of precious metals down and hold financial markets up, because we are in the middle of a perfect storm that is going to hit the powers that be like nothing ever seen in modern times.
You know, Andy, the powers that be and the central planners and the cartel have done an excellent job in managing this. And I know that you and I have been watching this, and it has looked like that they were going to lose control many times over the last few years, especially on nights like Brexit and nights like when Trump won. You had mentioned just now that the shortages of physical gold were starting to arise. Were you talking about the mine supply, or are you talking about actual physical shortages from bullion or physical supply for, let's say, sovereign wealth funds, high net worth investors, where they're buying a significant amount of bullion?
Right. And again, you know, because the market is so opaque, it's so difficult. I mean, even like when the U.S. Mint puts out its numbers, you know, we have to take it as gospel. But who would believe the United States government? I mean, they manipulate everything about gold. Why wouldn't they manipulate their numbers? Does it make sense to anyone that all of a sudden that demand would plummet off the face of the earth at a time where the price of gold in dollars is rising? Because basically the average person cares only about price. Gold is up $130 this year, and we're told that there's no demand. But the fact is, obviously, there is a demand because the price around the world is rising. And, you know, you listen to a guy like Andrew Maguire who's inside the wholesale market, and he's talking about the tightness out there. And we know from a mine supply standard, I mean, I've been saying for years how production would decline. And sure enough, we now have two sources. One was Standard & Poor's, and one was Credit Suisse, that both in the past few weeks or months have put out reports talking about mine supply collapsing. In fact, Standard & Poor's is estimating it'll fall 25% in the next 8 or 10 years, which is what I said years ago. I mean, America is the biggest producer, and they may fall more than that. They may fall by 40% or more because capital starvation in the sector for so long has made production, has made reserves fall, and has made the mining finances too weak to explore. So we're talking about supply is down and up because look what the price is doing around the world. It bottomed a year and a half ago, and it's only going to go higher as these currencies continue to fall. Here in the United States, yes, we can definitely confirm that business in the bullion industry has been very weak this year. You can only attribute it to the Trumpflation meme having created this explosion in stock prices to literally .com valuations. But at the same time, people are, just not understanding the fact that prices are going up anyway, and B, the United States economy is falling apart. I mean, if it's propaganda about the Fed raising rates, first of all, who cares? Rates at this point, they're tiny amounts of rates that are immaterial. And the fact is, every time they've raised rates, gold has gone up. And, they're not going to keep raising rates. They're going to eventually have to join the QE party and the negative interest rate party, just like the ECB said and the Bank of Japan today. And I mean, the Fed itself is expecting essentially zero growth in the first quarter. We're talking about retail Armageddon. Look at the data. Look at the retail sales numbers that just came out on Friday. Look at their own CPI, which is falling. Look at the manufacturing numbers that came out this morning. Even the soft data is going down. I mean, if there's anyone left that actually believes this stuff about the strengthening economy, and again, the strengthening economy was all based on Trumpflation, right? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? No repeal and replace of Obamacare, no tax cuts, no stimulus plan. Not that any of those things would help, but this is the things that were predicated, the growth was predicated on. It's all gone. In fact, it's at this point where Trump doesn't even have allies anymore. Who would have thought that America would become this geopolitical pariah, let alone an economic and monetary basket case of banana republic? But that's what's going on, and it won't be long. I don't care how much the PPT supports the Dow Jones propaganda average that the average person doesn't own anymore. They're not going to be able to control the physical markets for oil, for gold and silver, for anything that's real, for real estate, and they're not going to last through the geopolitical cataclysms that are going through. Again, there's a reason that I called Trump Brexit times 10, and even with the manipulation of markets that has gone on since, look what's happened to the country and the world. But, what I've called the Marine Le Pen, that's Brexit times 100. There's no escaping the ramifications of that just by saying, well, we'll try to naked short precious metals and buy gold. Again, buy the stocks. I mean, again, we're already at a record naked short position for silver, and yet silver it just came back. It's it's over its 200-week moving average, and demand is as strong worldwide as it ever has been. It's only going to get stronger.
Andy, Theresa May just announced a snap election June 7th. I don't even know what the hell that is. I know you probably do. What is this? What is this election, and does it have any relevance for gold investors?
Not really. Basically, and again, you see the same thing just happen in Italy, where they decide, basically the guy who's in charge, or the girl in this case, has the option of calling elections sooner than their scheduled time if they believe that it'll help their cause, solidify their strength. And in Theresa May's case, remember, she became the prime minister because of default, not because of election, because David Cameron lost his gambit to support the Remain. And now they just announced the Article 50 separation process, regarding the Brexit. So she's got to negotiate, and I think she wants to get a full mandate from the nation. So instead of waiting 2 years like she could have, she decided to call this because I think she knows she's going to win. So I don't think that really has any relevance, but the bigger relevance is what's going to happen around the other nations. Again, don't forget, everyone, that Greece needs to get bailed out again about 3 months from now, and they're not getting the money. I'm telling you, everyone right here. First of all, if Marine Le Pen wins, you're not even going to have a troika to administer a bailout of Greece, and Greece doesn't want a bailout, and they're not going to get one. So you're going to have the Grexit, especially if Marine Le Pen wins. You're also going to have the Catalonian secession. People don't realize because, of course, the mainstream doesn't report it for some reason. Catalonia is 25% of Spain's tax revenues and business, and they are planning to have their final vote, despite the fact that the Spanish government says they can't, but they're going to in September, and they're going to secede. And if Marine Le Pen wins, it's only going to foster that. Let alone the Italian elections, where now that Renzi lost that referendum decidedly, and then he got kicked out of his own party about a month ago, they have to announce elections in Spain as well, in Italy as well. And when they do, they're probably going to be the Five-Star Movement, which is the equivalent of Le Pen's National Front. And again, if she wins, that just guarantees that Italy's going to break off as well. So, if she doesn't win, it doesn't mean that everything is great. But if she does, I mean, there is no way, shape, or form that the powers that be will be able to manipulate their way out of the ramifications.
Andy, the debt ceiling isn't even being talked about on the mainstream press as well as the U.S. government, yet this thing maxed out now just over a month ago on March 15th. Do you think that Trump and Congress just think it's going to be, very easy to do? That's why they're not even dealing with it? Or do you think that it's a serious situation and we're looking at the summer from hell?
I mean, think about this, Daniel. All the stuff I just talked about, and I literally started off with, a 14-minute soliloquy, right? I didn't even mention this, okay? Or the fact that, what's today, April 18th? Well, on April 28th, if they don't get this continuing resolution, the government's going to shut down, okay? And from what I've read from everyone, people like Stockman, they're not going to, because they're going to do it just to fight, like the Republicans use their nuclear option to get their guy in office, and then you have the Freedom Caucus guys that kind of filibustered and got the Obamacare repeal in place. I mean, it's a total war going on in Congress, and not just Democrats against Republicans. It's Republicans against Republicans and everyone against Trump. And so from the way I read it, they actually will shut the government down simply over the issue of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about $70 million of funding, cutting some of that in a budget of $4 trillion, and they literally will shut the government down over it. And that's going to happen when they're still on vacation. Sorry. They don't get back from vacation until the 24th, where they will discuss it for 4 days before not passing it. But then, of course, you have the debt ceiling, and again, I still go back to, we've had 3 debt ceiling crises now in the past 5 years. 2011 was the one people remember most, because that's when the U.S. got stripped of its AAA credit rating by Standard & Poor's. Of course, no one has dared do that since, because the government pretty much almost put Standard & Poor's out of business for doing that. But that was when the debt ceiling was $14.1 trillion. That was only 5.5 years ago. Now we're at $19.9 trillion, and yet no one has downgraded the U.S. They still got AAA from the other guys. So that debt ceiling in 2011, that's when gold did its all-time high before they started smashing it down. And then you had the 2013 one where they created this whole sequester of spending, which right now is being blown out of the water. The deficits are exploding. Pretty much all that sequester spending cuts are all gone, let alone when Trump wants to get the biggest military budget of all time so he could bomb everyone on the face of the earth. And then you had the 2015 debt ceiling crisis, which was the one which in this fall of 2015, they said, well, why don't we just suspend the debt ceiling until after the 2016 elections? And that's why we haven't heard of it since. And the thing that's so crazy about it is, why did the Republicans let that happen? Why would the Republicans, led by John Boehner in October 2015, say, yeah, Democrats, we'll let you spend as much as you want and borrow as much as you want so that you can win the 2016 presidential election, and then we'll deal with it. I don't know why he did it. And he certainly didn't think that Donald Trump would come around and win. But the fact is, here we are today. And now the debt ceiling has been locked in stone at $19.9 trillion. And the Treasury is doing their usual, as they call it, extraordinary measures to buy themselves a few more weeks, because there's basically no cash left. So what they do is they, quote, borrow from the pension funds and do some accounting tricks to buy themselves a little time. So it looks like around Memorial Day we'll hit that debt ceiling limit. We may well have a shut government by that time. And we're certainly not going to have any agreement at all about absolutely anything. Because if you think they're fighting now about $70 million of Planned Parenthood, think what they're going to be fighting about when Trump wants to get all this spending in place, and he wants tax cuts that are unfunded, and he wants spending stimulus, and everyone's against him, and we need to have this explosion in military spending that was promised, and a wall. Oh yeah, the wall to Mexico. That's another thing that's going to stop everything and grind it to a halt because it'll never be approved by the Congress. So again, you're going to have this debt ceiling crisis in 2017, meaning like a month from now, which is far more devastating than the other three combined. And by the way, it's scheduled to hit right as the French elections occur. So all this stuff is going on at once. And so, when you look at precious metals, and forget the Dow Jones propaganda average, no one is watching that thing anymore. But when you look at something like precious metals, a physical market that's experiencing very extreme physical strains, just think of what it's going to be like when these things really start to hit, because Trumpflation is over, World War III is starting, and the United States economic crisis is really getting going, because, it's going to be ding dong, the Fed is dead, when they are forced to forget the ridiculous thing and raise interest rate. No, they're going to be going into ECB mode by the end of this year, and it's going to be scary.
Yeah, I believe on May 22nd as well that Obamacare, the subsidies for the insurance companies, has to be extended. Otherwise, it'll basically implode. Insurance companies will be jumping ship, as they already are. So there's so much going on right now, and it's all happening right now, and especially with Le Pen's election, which is the 23rd of April. I mean, this is all unfolding as we speak.
And actually, to clarify, what happens with the French election? And again, everyone should listen to my audio blog today, number 191, where I talk about that election and about Emmanuel Macron, and also my article last week. Actually, I did two. I did one on Monday that was called April 23rd, a potential turning point for the 99%. And I also did the one last week called Marine Le Pen, the potential Brexit times 100. Because just as I was before the Brexit, spending as much effort as I possibly could to educate people and spread the word of why the Brexit needed to pass, I'm doing the same thing here, especially if you're a precious metals person and you'd like to actually make some money on your investment after all these years. Spread the word. Spread my audio blog, number 191, to people who might vote in France. Spread these articles that I'm sending, and anyone else that's talking about the real issues out there. Because like we needed Hillary Clinton to win, to lose, 10 times more, we need Marine Le Pen to win. But anyway, just to clarify in this election, there's April 23rd, meaning this Sunday, is the first round. It's a 2-round election. There's 4 competitors right now for the 2 spots. So, the top 2 get to go to the May 7th second round. Number 1 is going to, Le Pen, they're trying to, I told you, they double, counted, they're sending double election cards to the people who are likely to vote against her. But she's going to still make it through that. And the other guy is this Macron guy who's 39 years old. That's what I talk about today. He was the finance and he was basically the equivalent of Treasury Secretary under Francois Hollande, the outgoing president, who has the lowest rating in French president history, to the point where he's not even running for re-election. So his now 39-year-old former Treasury Secretary, who was 36 and 37 at the time, is the guy that they now all of a sudden say is going to win, who came out of nowhere because the guy they said before him was going to win, this guy Francois Fillon, who was the equivalent of vice president a few years ago, is now, because of this embezzlement scandal, he's still in the race somehow, but they realize he's not going to win. And now there's an actual communist. I don't mean like a Bernie Sanders communist, an actual communist named Mélenchon who's just shooting up the polls. Wouldn't that be great if Mélenchon and Le Pen were the 2 finalists, a communist and the ultimate nationalist, which could happen. But the point is, on this Sunday, you're going to have the top 2 are going to win. I fully expect that even with the rigging that she's going to get there. And when she does, you're going to see 2 weeks of unprecedented volatility in financial markets and propaganda because, her armies, and believe me, people should watch the 60 Minutes interview that she did with that horrible, despicable Anderson Cooper about a month ago, because in it you see some of the rallies that she gives. And if you think Trump had big rallies, you should see how many people show up to her rallies. And if she gets through this first round on Sunday, you can bet that the rallies are going to be unlike anything you've seen, because this is the fate of Europe. Because the people of, it's one thing if the Britons leave. The Britons aren't even part of the euro currency. They're kind of in their own island, literally. Mm-hmm. But if France goes, it's the entire end. It is the breakup that day. May 7th is the election. May 8th is the official end of the euro. It's the end of the troika that administers bailouts to Greece. It's going to be the end of the IMF as a functioning entity. It's going to be the end of Mario Draghi as an important person in the world. And it's going to be the beginning of the end of the biggest sovereign debt bubble and crisis in history as all these countries start to go their separate ways and start to spread the word as far over here about maybe in this country we need to have some separation because of all the cataclysms that have been created by this horrific monetary system. So again, everyone, spread the word of what's going on in the next couple of weeks in France, and there's never been a time, never in the history of this country, to be more aware of the risks around you, politically, economically, socially, monetarily, heck, even militarily. This is the time to protect yourself.
All right, Andy Hoffman of milesfranklin.com. You can purchase bullion directly from them. And you can also go to milesfranklin.com to get Andy's podcast and his blog. Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Daniel. Thanks so much.